Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold, wet, and brimming with smells you can't quite describe, though fishy campfire comes close. You find yourself standing in a Viking harbor at dawn. Thin layer of frost shivers across, the ground curling into strange ghostly spirals that drift around your ankles. You can almost hear your teeth chattering, though you can't tell if it's the chill or the thought of what's coming for breakfast. The harbor is busy in that slow, sleepy way. Heavy wooden boats bobbing, fishermen mumbling in half-sung Norse, seals popping up now and then to watch you judge their fashion choices. You pull your cloak tighter. Somewhere a dog barks at a seagull, and you imagine that dog desperately wondering why anyone would willingly wake up this early to chase whales. There's a faint smell of old fish, damp wool, and a whiff of seaweed that honestly makes your favorite sushi place smell like a luxury spa. Then it dawns on you. Today's meal isn't your standard cod or herring. No, today, there's a whale. On the menu, a whole whale. You probably won't survive this if you're squeamish or if your cholesterol levels are already plotting revenge. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're up for it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing all those sleepy timestamps from around the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you shuffle closer to the shoreline, you hear the creak of oars and the rhythmic chanting of men preparing for the hunt. You can't help but notice the fine frost sparkling on their rough tunics. It feels like everyone around you has an unspoken agreement. Ignore the cold. Focus on the whale. One grizzled old man hands you a wooden mug of something that might be mead or leftover. Dishwater historians still argue whether they really drank mead that early in the day. You decide to sip it anyway, grimacing as it slides down your throat. Like slightly fermented honey sludge. Seagulls wheel overhead, probably hoping for a spare eyeball or a piece of blubber to snack on later. You watch as the harpooners test their ropes, their breath floating like tiny, ghostly dragons. The harbor water itself seems to shiver, reflecting the pinkish smear of sunrise against distant snow-covered peaks. You imagine slipping and face-planting into that icy soup shore. It'd wake you up faster than any espresso shot. But you'd also smell like a rotting sea lion for weeks. You hear talk of the day's goals. A big whale is spotted just beyond the bay. It's a communal effort. Success means enough food to last the harsh winter. Failure means, well, possibly a new line of jokes about your tragic swimming skills. You join in with a few other stragglers, carrying ropes, baskets, and what might be a glorified fish club. A young warrior next to you is bragging about how last season he allegedly dragged a baby whale ashore single-handedly. Another insists he once saw a whale sneeze so hard it capsized a fishing boat. You politely nod. After all, you're new here, and you've got zero whale sneezing experience to compare. You step around a tangle of nets, noticing small details. Beads sewn into cloak edges. A fur-apped knife handle. Seagull feather tucked behind someone's ear, like a half-forgotten hair clip. You catch yourself thinking about modern life dishwashers. Grocery store sushi, Uber Eats, and how wonderfully boring those conveniences sound compared to today's blubber ballet. As the sun rises higher, its warmth barely brushes your frozen cheeks. You glance back at the longhouses lined up like stoic wooden guardians, smoke curling from the roof holes. There's a certain poetry in that tan, almost serene balance between brutal survival and domestic coziness. You can almost picture a Viking mother humming softly while stirring whale stew in a giant cauldron, occasionally yelling at children to stop sword fighting with whale ribs. Your feet crunch along icy sand, your fingers tingle, and your nose threatens to stage a rebellion and detach itself. But despite the discomfort, there's a weird, gentle pride humming through the group in unspoken knowledge that they're bound together by the sea. The cold and the promise of something big, smoky, and surprisingly tender waiting in the cooking pit. You find yourself thinking, maybe there's a strange kind of comfort in these rough rituals. Perhaps, like those steaming cups of questionable mead, they warm you in ways a blanket never could. As you breathe in the salt and the cold and the excitement, You realize you're about to witness and taste something so profoundly Viking that it might just haunt your dreams. In a good way. You shuffle closer to the water's edge, squinting into the low sun that glimmers across the rippling ford like scattered shards of glass. You hear shouts from the boats, the distinct clatter of oars against hulls, and the rhythmic grunts of men preparing for what you might call, if you're feeling poetic, a harpoon ballet. The boats move with surprising grace, each Viking poised at his station, spears gleaming in the morning light. You wonder how no one skewers their foot or accidentally pokes their friend's beard off in this organized chaos. It's almost hypnotic. The rowers chant under their breath, each stroke of the oar echoing against the cold cliffs. Historians still argue whether these chants were spiritual invocations, secret motivational songs, or just off-key complaining about how cold the water is. You climb onto a slippery rock for a better view, though your knees protest like a creaky old barn door. Out there you spot the enormous, glistening back of a whale cresting the water. Its slow rolling movement suggests a sort of ancient patience, as if it has absolutely zero concerns about your dinner plans. You imagine it humming underwater, perhaps composing a gentle ballad titled, "Humans Are Overrated." The lead harpooner raises his arm, and for a split second, the entire crew freezes except for the seagulls, who continue to gossip noisily overhead. With one powerful motion, the harpoon arcs through the air and disappears with a distant, wet thunk. You wince, even as the men burst into cheers and urgent calls. You might feel a pang of sympathy for the whale, but you remind yourself that in these harsh northern lands, survival often depended on such hunts. One burly oarsman gestures for you to help haul the rope. You oblige, though you quickly realize that helping means clinging to a coarse hemp line that tries to shred your palms into Viking confetti. As the whale thrashes, waves slap over the boat's sides, soaking your ankles and making you question your life choices, like why you didn't just stay home and bake cinnamon rolls. Slowly they guide the massive creature toward the shallows. It feels like tug-of-war with a sentient iceberg. You watch as other boats swarm to assist, a complicated aquatic dance that somehow avoids entanglement. It's a scene so coordinated that it would make synchronized swimmers feel like awkward toddlers at a pool party. Meanwhile, your teeth chatter, partly from cold and partly from nerves. A young boy runs along the shore, carrying spare ropes and shouting instructions no one really listens to. He almost wipes out on a patch of kelp, which you admit would make an excellent blooper reel. A nearby elder offers you a dried fish snack. For energy, you take a bite and immediately regret it. It tastes like salted sandal. Yet to your surprise, the chewiness distracts you from the brutal tugging at the rope, bit by bit. The whale edges closer, belly up like some colossal waterlogged log. It exhales a misty plume that briefly smells like every fish market you've ever avoided. Around you, the atmosphere shifts, anticipation turns into triumph. The men exchange shoulder claps that probably bruise more than comfort. You can't help but admire their sheer determination and camaraderie. Historians still argue whether whaling in this era was an elite activity or a community free-for-all. Some say only the most experienced warriors led the hunts, while others claim that even teenagers would tag along for bragging rights. Either way, everyone seems to know their role, even if your role is mostly hold this rope and try not to fall over. As the whale finally reaches the shallows, a group rushes forward with smaller spears and knives to finish the job, ensuring that tonight's feast is secured. Almost feel like you've passed some secret test of patience and teamwork, albeit with significantly more kelp than you'd prefer. Looking around, you spot a woman on the shore, lighting a small fire, preparing a kettle. The smell of hot broth drifts your way, and your stomach growls like an offended bear. The woman laughs and offers you a mug, which you accept with both hands as if it's the Holy Grail. The warmth trickles down your frozen insides, igniting tiny sparks of gratitude. You might not have earned your Viking stripes today, but at least you won't freeze into a human popsicle before lunch. Through the haze of steam, you catch the first glimpse of the men beginning to cut away blubber. It's an oddly reverent moment. No cheers now, only focused murmurs and careful blade work. You imagine what it must feel like to know that one creature can feed so many, carry so many stories, and fuel so many long, smoky nights ahead. Your fingers finally thaw a bit as you sip the broth, and your shoulders relax into the soundscape of waves, crackling fires, and quiet triumph. You glance at the horizon where the morning has now grown into full daylight, the fjords shimmering like an endless sheet of hammered silver. You may have started as an outsider today, but already the salt spray on your skin and the ache in your arms feel like a peculiar badge of honor. You're beginning to understand here the whale is more than food. It's a promise of survival, a source of pride, and perhaps most importantly, the star of tonight's dinner, story told with exaggerated gestures and questionable accuracy, naturally. With the whale now lying colossal and silent in the shallows, you watch as the men swarm it like ants at a dropped honeypot. They begin carving enormous slabs from the creature, each slice revealing layers of shimmering blubber and dense pinkish meat beneath. You can almost hear your arteries protesting from 1,000 years away. The smell is an experience all on its own, a potent blend of ocean brine, seaweed funk, and a deep fatty musk that makes your nostrils flare and your brain consider relocating to a sunnier, less pungent timeline. Step carefully across the slippery rocks, trying to avoid becoming an impromptu Viking pancake underfoot. Historians still argue whether they used specific ceremonial chants during this butchering process, or just collectively grumbled about the cold and each other's knife skills. As you approach, you notice the surprising order in the chaos. Certain men focus purely on cutting the blubber into long ribbons, while others pack it into barrels lined up like eager students waiting for lunch. Young boys dash about with woven baskets, gathering smaller scraps and prized bits like the tongue and liver. You almost expect someone to announce, "First come, first served," in booming Norse. One elder, his beard crusted with frost and what suspiciously looks like whale oil, calls you over. He gestures at a pile of steaming blubber chunks and motions for you to help sort them. You hesitantly poke at a hunk the size of a toddler. It jiggles like a particularly judgmental jello. Mole. You can't help but laugh under your breath, imagining this is the worst potluck dish in human history while you're stacking pieces. A woman passes by carrying a basket of kelp, muttering something about the next batch of seasoning paste. You raise an eyebrow. Who knew that sea vegetables could end up as whale meat spa treatments? The woman gives you a sly wink, and you almost suspect she's in on some cosmic joke. Nearby, a young man enthusiastically demonstrates how to peel off the skin without slicing too deep into the fat below. His technique is so swift and confident that you start thinking he might secretly moonlight as a sushi chef from the future. The blades they use are curved and slightly hooked, crafted for precision proof that even these rugged seafarers understood the importance of a good knife set long before influencer chefs started showing theirs off online. One boy trips, sending a basket of blubber chunks flying into the air like an extremely unappetizing confetti cannon. Laughter erupts from the workers, and even the boy joins in, slapping his forehead and cursing the gods for giving him 2 left feet. You find yourself giggling too, the moment feeling almost lighthearted, despite the heavy work at hand. Historians still debate whether these big butchering sessions doubled as social mixers or family bonding events. There's evidence of songs, jokes, and even flirtations breaking out among the workers. After all, nothing says future romance quite like exchanging greasy winks over a steaming whale liver. You take a moment to look at the mountains looming in the distance, their snow-capped peaks catching the pale sun. The fjord glitters below, them dotted with more returning boats and seals that probably feel deeply offended by today's activities. Raven lands near you, pecking curiously at a stray flake of fat before hopping away in disgust, perhaps expecting something crunchier. Back at your feet, the sorting continues with meticulous detail. The best cuts are placed in special wooden troughs, destined for communal feasts or offerings to the gods. The slightly lower-grade chunks will be smoked or fermented for long-term storage, while the leftover odds and ends cartilage, bits of skin, odd shreds will become animal feed or even lamp oil. Nothing goes to waste. These people treat every slippery morsel as if it carries a bit of the gods. An older woman brings over a small ceramic jar and offers you a taste of something that looks like dark paste. Against your better judgment, you dip a finger and try it. Instantly, your tongue flails in confusion. It's a fierce, empty, sweet concoction, with a strange tang that makes you squint so hard you almost see into the future. She cackles at your reaction, smacking your shoulder approvingly. She explains that this is a base marinade for the whale meat, mixed with herbs, kelp, and sometimes even berries. You nod politely, trying not to imagine it as a whale-flavored smoothie. Somewhere deep inside, though, a small part of you admits it's genius, resourceful, sustainable, and deeply tied to the rhythms of this harsh northern life. As you wipe your hands on a spare cloth, which doesn't really help, you can't help but feel a quiet admiration for these people. Their ability to transform this titanic beast into a myriad of useful and flavorful components reflects not just survival skills, but an artistry, a deep intimacy with nature's bounty that most modern kitchens wouldn't dare to dream of. With piles of meat stacked high and blubber barrels full to bursting, you hear a call echo across the harbor. The whale is officially butchered, and the real culinary alchemy is about to begin. You stretch your aching arms, glance at the stained sky, turning soft shades of blue and rose, and brace yourself for the next chapter in this epic feast. You wipe the last stubborn streaks of blubber from your hands, though, let's be honest. Your fingernails will smell like whale fat until Ragnarok. As you step away from the harbor, you follow a winding path toward the longhouses, where fires already crackle and glow, like mischievous eyes peeking through the morning haze. The air here is different. Wood smoke mingling with earthy moss and the faint, sour temps of fermenting fish somewhere nearby. You notice barrels lined up like soldiers, some covered with heavy wooden lids weighed down by rocks. One curious sniff inside reveals a pungent, nose-curdling surprise, probably the Viking version of a "do not open" sign. You sidle up to a small group of women and elders huddled around a fire pit. They're discussing the day's seasoning plans, voices low and conspiratorial, as if plotting an elaborate heist. You listen intently, trying to piece together the recipe's secrets that involve no salt at all. Why no salt? In this corner of the Viking world, salt is a luxury item rarer than a sober uncle at a feast. It has to be laboriously harvested from sea brine or traded for at great expense. Historians still argue whether certain coastal communities tried boiling seawater for salt or relied purely on imports from southern lands. Either way, salt was often reserved for special guests or trade, not for the everyday chore of flavoring whale meat. Without this precious mineral, they turned to their harsh, resourceful environment for solutions. You watch as a woman pounds kelp into a slimy paste, adding it to a wooden trough already half filled with chopped herbs and berries. A teenage boy sprinkles in ashes from a birch fire, explaining proudly that this adds character, which you suspect is code for distracts. From the rotting smell, one elder is stirring a thick brown mixture that looks like the suspicious goo left at the bottom of a compost bin. He offers you a taste on a carved bone spoon. You close your eyes, trying to summon the bravery of Thor himself. The taste is shocking, smoky, earthy, oddly sweet, with a background note of what you can only describe as forest after rain meets fish market at midnight. You cough and grin politely, earning an approving shoulder slap so hard it almost dislocates something important. Nearby, strips of whale meat are being carefully massaged with this bizarre blend. The women work with an almost meditative grace, pressing the seasoning deep into the flesh as if coaxing secrets out of an ancient stone. One woman leans toward you, her eyes sparkling, and confides that if you do it right, the meat doesn't just taste good, tells stories. You nod solemnly, though your brain is still stuck on that flavor bomb you just survived. You notice the young warriors scraping old wooden boards to prepare drying racks. They argue about the best smoking woods. Some swear by birch, others claim juniper gives a sweeter touch, while one cheeky boy suggests using driftwood for a truly adventurous aftertaste. Historians still debate which trees were most commonly used. Some charred stumps found in ancient settlements suggest they experimented widely, perhaps even swapping methods based on whatever was least damp that week, as the racks take shape. You wander over to a small side fire where a man is burning aromatic herbs. He claims this keeps evil spirits away from the curing meat, and possibly from nosy visitors like you. The smoke curls lazily around your head, and for a moment you feel like you're inside a dreamy, ancient sauna. A brief distraction from the heavy scent of marine mammal wafting everywhere. Back near the longhouse door, an old woman crushes berries into a sticky dye, smearing it over select cuts. She insists it locks in the sea magic and helps preserve the meat's soul. You glance at her suspiciously, wondering if this is a prank on newcomers, but she just cackles and flicks berry juice at your tunic. You now sport a new avant-garde polka dot design that Paris Fashion Week probably wouldn't appreciate. You take a deep breath and let the mixture of scents and voices wash over you. There's something hypnotic in this communal alchemy and odd, comforting sense that no matter how harsh the wind or how bleak the winter, the clan would gather here and transform a mountain of meat into smoky, tangy, almost poetic sustenance. It feels like a living ritual, echoing through the centuries every time someone lights a fire or scrapes a blade against a wooden trough, and as you help carry a few slippery cuts to the racks, you realize there's a strange intimacy in this process, hands. Smoke, stories, and laughter, all woven together like a rough-spun tapestry. Even if your modern palate might recoil, there's an undeniable magic in watching resourcefulness bloom against the odds. You pause to stretch your aching back. The sun finally peeking through the misty canopy of trees. You can almost hear your stomach whisper, "Good luck with that later," as it contemplates the whale banquet to come. A young girl runs by giggling, smearing berry paste on her brother's face, and for a moment, you feel utterly present, anchored by the smell of smoke, the echo of laughter, and the rhythmic sound of blades working through ancient rituals. By now, your hands are stained with berry juice. Ash smudges your cheek, and the scent of sea funk clings to your every fiber like an over-enthusiastic barnacle. You follow a winding trail away from the smoking racks, toward a rocky outcrop where the real flavor magic is happening not in the flames, but in the briny depths of the Viking pantry. Seaweed. Yes, you heard that right. Welcome to the Ocean Salad Bar, where kelp isn't just for wrapping sushi, it's an essential spice rack for Vikings with a salt shortage and a dream. You join a gathering of women and a few older men, hunched over woven baskets filled with an array of seaweeds. There's long ribbon-like strands that glisten like wet leather, thin reddish curls like underwater parsley, and thick knotted green clumps that look suspiciously like something the ocean coughed up after a long night. Out. A woman pats the rock beside her, inviting you to sit. You do? And immediately realize the stone is colder than betrayal. One woman hands you a strip of dried kelp and instructs you to chew. You give it a skeptical nibble. Salty, a little sweet with a texture somewhere between fruit leather and regret. She nods approvingly. It's the good kind, she says. The one the wind favors. You don't know what that means? But it sounds poetic enough to pretend you understand. She explains that different seaweeds are harvested for different purposes. Thick types for fermentation bases, thin types for wrapping or stuffing, red types for medicinal brews. You glance at the rock in front of her where she's pounding some into paste using a round stone, her hands swift and sure. Historians still argue whether Vikings intentionally fermented seaweed or if it just sort of happened when they forgot it under a rock too long. Either way, the resulting sauces were revered for their tangy zing and miraculous gut-cleansing properties. Yay. Nearby, a man stirs a bubbling pot over a small fire, the liquid inside a strange hue of greenish-brown. He adds a chunk of whale meat, then spoons in the seaweed, paste with flair, like a Norse Gordon Ramsay who's absolutely fed up with bland Viking cuisine. The pot hisses and burps, sending up a plume of steam that smells like seawater, smoked wood, and whatever kelp dreams of when it's alone. You help prep strips of meat, rubbing them with seaweed mash and packing them tightly into earthenware pots. It's not glamorous work, but there's something oddly soothing about the repetition rub. Fold, layer, seal. Someone hands you a wooden spoon dipped in a sample sauce. You sip, brace yourself. And, hey, not bad. There's a briny bite, a smoky echo from earlier fires, and an aftertaste like licking a driftwood log that's been kissed by the gods. You're honestly surprised your taste buds haven't revolted. Seaweed, you learn, wasn't just for flavor. It acted as a partial preservative, its natural salt and minerals slowing decay. Some communities even stuffed seaweed into drying racks to lend its aroma to the meat. Others laid strips between cuts and barrels, layering them like unholy lasagna. And in moments of deep culinary inspiration, or possibly desperation, they mixed seaweed paste with wild berries and fish oil to create a Viking version of barbecue glaze. Historians still debate whether this was a stroke of genius or a communal dare gone too far. A wrinkled elder, face sun-creased and smiling, offers, "You, a flatbread topped with seaweed whale mash? It looks like a crime against carbs, but your curiosity outweighs your common sense. The texture's interesting. The flavor even more so. But oddly, it grows on you with each bite. Maybe your body's adapting. Maybe your standards are lowering. Or maybe, just maybe, it's not that bad once you give up the idea of flavor as you know it. You help tie bundles of dried seaweed together, stacking them carefully like scrolls of edible parchment. They'll be used through the winter, adding seasoning to stews and smokehouses alike." A woman explains that certain seaweeds are burned in small quantities to scent the drying meat, giving it a unique Viking touch. She winks. You have no idea what that means either. Maybe it's just the salty twinkle in her eye as the sun climbs higher. The shore glows golden, lighting up the drying racks and scattered fire pits. The air is thick with steam, laughter, and the oddly comforting smell of kelp bubbling in ancient pots. It feels timeless, like you've slipped through a portal where gourmet means doesn't kill you. And the Michelin star is awarded for not burning down the longhouse. You sit back on a rock, rubbing sore hands against your cloak, and glance around at the scene. Warriors lounging with skewers in hand, old women arguing about berry ratios, kids sneaking licks of sauce when they think no one's looking. It's messy, it's pungent, it's delightful in its own unfiltered way. You might not trade your modern kitchen for this, but there's something deeply human about it. The trial and error, the creativity born from scarcity, and the unapologetic joy of turning sea sludge into a family recipe. Your stomach grumbles ominously, reminding you that you're slowly developing an appetite for whatever comes next, whether that's whale jerky or kelp kebabs. And as another spoonful of mystery paste makes its way toward your mouth, you can't help but smile. You've eaten worse. You've smelled worse. But you've never felt this strangely. At home, the morning slowly turns into a pale, stretched out afternoon as you wander back toward the fires, guided by the rising curls of smoke that bend and dance in the cold breeze like ancient whispering spirits. You hear the low rumble of voices, punctuated by the clatter of wooden spoons and the occasional delighted squeal from someone who just tasted a new batch of sauce. You crouch next to a long pit lined with hot stones and smoldering embers. Over it, wooden racks hold chunks of whale meat dripping fat like slow, sticky rain. The smell is at once smoky and oceanic, a combination that makes your eyes water and your stomach do cartwheels of both dread and anticipation. You can't help but think it would be the ultimate dare at a modern backyard barbecue. Try the whale chunk. Loser washes the longship. A woman stirs a cauldron off to the side, her arms strong and splattered with what looks like a Jackson Pollock painting, made entirely from whale juice and seaweed goo. She tosses in a handful of forest herbs you helped gather earlier, then dips a carved ladle in for a careful sip. She smacks her lips thoughtfully, adds a pinch of crushed juniper, and mutters, "Better than last winter's batch." You believe her, though you suspect last winter's batch may have included accidental moss or whatever they scraped from the dog's fur. Nearby, barrels bubble ominously. You lean closer to one and catch a whiff so intense it feels like your brain is performing a backflip. Fermentation, you realize. Vikings loved fermenting things: fish, milk, and apparently whale meat.
Historians still argue whether these fermentations
pits were planned culinary strategies, or just a result of leaving things around too long and deciding to roll with it. Either way, they believe these funky concoctions built strong stomachs and stronger warriors. Who needs probiotics when you've got barrel-aged whale surprise? A young man with a mischievous grin offers you a wooden skewer. You hesitate, remembering that last time you trusted him, you ended up with fish eyes in your mouth. But curiosity is a powerful force, some might say a dangerous one. You take the skewer and nibble. The meat is chewy, smoky, with a tangy aftershock from the seaweed rub and a whisper of juniper. You give a thumbs up, earning a hearty slap on the back that nearly sends you face first into the fire pit, further down the row. An elder stands vigil over a line of smaller clay pots. He explains, in a voice that sounds like gravel sliding down a mountain, that these pots contain whale fat mixed with berries and forest honey, sealed and left to develop flavors for weeks. He describes it as dessert, though you suspect. Modern desert enthusiasts might file lawsuits for that claim. You're handed a small chunk to taste. It's rich, almost buttery, with an unexpected fruity edge that somehow makes you think of summer meadows and very confused bees. You chew slowly, unsure whether to gag or demand a second piece. You settle on a polite nod, and he grins, revealing a set of teeth as jagged as a rocky coastline as you wander. You notice some warriors tending to wooden frames where thin slices of meat hang like primitive wind chimes. Each slice catches the breeze, slowly hardening under the combined magic of sea air and low smoky heat. This process is as old as their long voyages, meat dried and preserved to feed raiding parties, trading expeditions, and occasional accidental camping trips gone horribly wrong. You kneel to adjust a sagging rack, only to slip and land on your backside in a patch of cold mud. You grin sheepishly, wiping your hands on your cloak and muttering something about new mud therapy trends. A woman near you giggles, tossing you a scrap of linen to clean up. You feel a small surge of warmth at this camaraderie humiliation. Tastes better when shared? Historians still debate whether these giant smoking operations doubled as social events or serious sacred work. Judging by the teasing, jokes, and constant swapping of wooden cups filled with something suspiciously alcoholic, you suspect it was a bit of both. Work for them was woven tightly into the fabric of life, like salt into the CIF, only they had more actual salt to work with. Later, as you poke around a side pit, you discover a small, shallow trough where leftover drippings collect. Someone enthusiastically explains that this precious liquid is used to waterproof boots and cloaks, and occasionally as a hair treatment to achieve that special Viking wet look. You try to imagine a future influencer marketing campaign for whale. Drip hair oil probably not happening anytime soon. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch like tired limbs across the beach. You feel your energy ebbing, muscles aching, but there's an odd contentment growing inside you. Sense that you're part of something ancient and bizarrely human. The trial, it's the error, the triumph, the fermented chaos, and the relentless. Laughter echoing off stone and sea, and so you find yourself sitting by the fire, poking a skewer of mystery meat, looking out over the fjord where the last glow of day pools in rippling silver. You take a bite, salty sweet smoke curling across your tongue, and wonder how on earth you'll ever explain this to your friends back home. As twilight slowly bleeds across the fjord, painting the sky in bruised purples and delicate golds, you notice a small group of traders arriving by boat. Their hulls are piled with furs, dried fish, carved trinkets, and most intriguing spice. Pouches tied tightly with leather cords. You watch as they hop out, cloaks flaring, each one looking as if they've got a scandalous story or two hidden under their belts. A wiry man with a fox fur hood steps forward, flashing a grin that suggests he's either about to sell you something magical or cheat you out of your last copper coin. He reveals a pouch of dried herbs and exotic spices, and the crowd gathers instantly, drawn to the promise of new flavors like moths to a flame. Historians still argue whether these traveling traders were true culinary innovators or just opportunistic middlemen who overcharged for the equivalent of medieval taco seasoning. You lean closer, inhaling scents that make your nose twitch, sharp notes of wild garlic, hints of cumin, a ghost of cardamom aromas that seem almost illegal in a world where kelp is king.
Oh.
The fox-hooded man boasts of faraway deserts where sandstorms taste like pepper in mountains, where you can harvest the wind for salt. You suspect he's embellishing just a smidge. One bold young woman bargains for a handful of ground seeds that When mixed with whale fat, apparently create a glaze so delicious, it can make a berserker weep mid-battle. You watch her proudly toss the tiny pouch into her apron, beaming like she just scored. Front row tickets to a longhouse storytelling night. You hear a warrior bragging that he once smuggled spices from an Irish monastery, only to have them stolen by a particularly aggressive goat during a fjord crossing. Did you raise an eyebrow? He insists it's true. Another man claims he traded a single amber bead for a sprig of thyme so fragrant that his neighbor accused him of witchcraft. Everyone roars with laughter. You're offered a small pinch of some dark red powder. You hesitate, then dab it on your tongue. Instantly, warmth blossoms across your mouth and your eyes widen in shock. The group howls in delight at your expression, slapping each other's shoulders. You wave your arms as if trying to waft away the sudden spicy surprise, only to be handed a horn of mead that you gulp too quickly, earning more laughter. Historians still debate the true extent of spice trade influence in Viking culinary life. Some argue it was minimal, confined to the wealthiest chieftains. Others believe these exotic touches snuck their way into even the humblest homes when adventurous relatives returned from raids or daring trades. Regardless, tonight, every cook and every wandering tongue is eager to experiment. You move from group to group, watching them crush, sprinkle, and sniff. A grandmother carefully rubs a blackened powder into a thick slab of meat, muttering about warding off sea spirits and keeping the in-laws quiet. A young boy sneaks behind her, snatching a handful to prank his friend's soup later. You see him sprint off giggling. You can't help but cheer him on internally. A man approaches you with a large, glistening chunk of whale meat, now smeared with the exotic blend. He urges you to try it, insisting it will make your inner warrior sing. You take a cautious bite. The taste explodes across your palate, smoky, earthy, peppery, with a background sweetness that reminds you of half-burned marshmallows on a camping trip gone slightly wrong. You cough, then laugh, and then, unexpectedly, you want another bite. Nearby, a few women chatter excitedly about new possible recipes, debating whether to soak the spices first or rub them in dry. They mention creating a kind of whale jerky, with layers of smoky forest herbs and these new foreign powders. One woman proposes stuffing small cuts with spiced paste before smoking them, while another threatens to set her kitchen on fire if forced to try that again. Underneath the banter, in experimental chaos, there's a current of excitement. You realize these people aren't just surviving, they're innovating, they're playing, stretching flavors, borrowing magic from lands they'll probably never see. Feels almost futuristic, like an Iron Chef episode unfolding centuries. Too early and without the camera crew, you sink onto a log by the fire, cheeks still tingling from spice and laughter as the last trader packs up his boat. The sun finally disappears, leaving only the embers to paint the faces around you with flickering warmth. You watch a warrior and a trader exchange a small leather pouch in an embrace that feels ancient and necessary, proof that even the fiercest of raiders appreciate a good seasoning. And as you lick the last traces of spice from your lips, you lean back and sigh. There's a kind of gentle wonder here, in the borrowed flavors, in the fearless hands willing to try something new, in the knowing nods and delighted gasps at each surprising taste. Tonight you're not just an observer. In a culinary secret pass through laughter and smoky twilight. The night deepens, and stars begin their slow dance overhead, shimmering like frost caught in a lantern's glow. You wander away from the traders, following a narrow forest trail lined with moss-covered stones and stunted birch trees that lean, as if whispering secrets to each other. The air here feels cooler, filled with the hush of damp earth and pine resin. Your guide, a wiry old woman named Astrid, waves you deeper into the undergrowth. She's got a crooked grin and a basket slung. Across her back, bulging with strange lumps and twisted roots, she claims she can find flavor where even foxes refuse to sniff. You believe her mostly because she's already dared you to chew on something called wolf lichen. If you question her methods, Astrid shows you small patches of pale green lichen clinging to tree trunks like soft armor. She carefully scrapes it into her basket, explaining that, when dried and ground, It imparts a mild bitterness that cuts the heavy whale fat beautifully. Historians still argue whether Vikings intentionally used these lichens for flavor or simply as a last resort when their stockpile of herbs ran out midwinter. Either way, you have to admire their determination not to let a single tree crust go to waste. Further along, Astrid points out a cluster of low-growing herbs: creeping thyme, wild angelica, and mountain sorrel. She plucks a few sprigs and hands them to you. You sniff cautiously. They smell sharp and refreshing, like a cold breeze straight off the fjord. You bite into a sorrel leaf. It's tangy, almost lemony, and makes your lips pucker in surprise. You can't help but imagine some Viking warrior trying this on a dare and instantly gaining lifelong bragging rights. Astrid laughs, her voice echoing through the woods like a mischievous raven. She tells you that in some stories, certain herbs were believed to hold protective magic. Rubbing them into meat wasn't just culinary, it was spiritual insurance against bad luck. Sour spirits, or even that one uncle who always overstayed. His welcome at feasts. A young boy trails behind, collecting mushrooms with a focused intensity. You peek into his basket: orange caps, pale frilly parasols, and a few ominous-looking black lumps that you pray aren't dinner-bound. He informs you, in a very serious tone, that his mother makes a special sauce with these, and it's so strong it once made his father forget where he buried the winter ale barrel. You nod gravely, not sure whether to laugh or start preparing a rescue plan. Historians still argue whether mushrooms were widely incorporated into Viking cooking or viewed with deep suspicion. Some evidence suggests that certain fungi were prized for their mind-opening qualities, which might explain berserkers running into battles shirtless and screaming at trees. Back at Astrid's clearing, a woman is grinding lichen and herbs together with a heavy stone. The paste is thick, earthy, and smells like rain-soaked bark and wildflower nectar. You'll help scoop it into small clay pots to be used later in the longhouse kitchens. Your fingers soon turn greenish-brown, which Astrid insists is the mark of true culinary courage. Consider starting a new Viking fashion trend: moss-manici ures nearby. Another woman starts a small fire to warm her hands. She casually tosses a few sprigs of wild thyme into the flames, sending up fragrant smoke. You inhale deeply, feeling the scent swirl around your head, making you slightly dizzy and oddly serene. You imagine marketing this as Viking spa aromatherapy. Back home, though, you'd have to convince people it won't involve whale byproducts. You wander over to watch a young girl stuffing whale meat with a mixture of forest herbs and dried berries, her nimble fingers moving faster than a startled squirrel. She tells you this helps balance the fatty richness and keeps the spirits entertained apparently. Bored ghosts are a big culinary faux pas. Make a mental note. When in doubt, feed the ghosts. Around you, the forest seems to lean in closer, listening to your every step and breath. The moonlight glimmers across wet moss, turning it into a velvet carpet woven by unseen hands. You feel strangely honored to share this space, to be let in on these quiet foraging rituals that are equal parts survival strategy, magic, and mischief. Astrid finally leads you back, toward the edge of the woods, her basket now overflowing with wild treasures. Can't help but glance back over your shoulder, half expecting the trees to wave goodbye. Your arms are full of herbs and lichen, your head buzzing from new scents and the gentle hum of forest whispers. As you approach the firelit beach again, you realize you've carried more than just foraged goods. You've absorbed the ancient patience, the playful reverence, and the deep, fearless curiosity that pushes these people to turn every last root and moss scrap into a culinary adventure. And though your modern mind still longs for a clean kitchen counter and maybe a mild tomato sauce, tonight you wouldn't trade this muddy, moss-smeared journey for all the hot showers in the world. When you step back into the open clearing, the fires seem brighter, the laughter louder, and the air even thicker with scents so layered they might as well be an edible opera. You catch a glimpse of children darting between racks, giggling as they dodge stray drops of whale fat. The longhouse looms ahead, glowing warmly, almost like a giant sleeping beast inviting you in for a nap. But there will be no napping. Not tonight. It's for feasting. Inside, the longhouse is alive with movement and noise. Smoke weaves through the rafters, curling around the wooden beams like sleepy cats. You squint past the haze and find a row of benches lining a long table that looks as if it's been assembled by a particularly enthusiastic lumberjack after 3 cups of mead. You take a seat near a group of elders, their hair braided with beads and small bones, each looking like they could tell you a bedtime story that would make your dreams run away screaming. One offers you a horn filled with frothy honey-colored mead. Take a tentative sip, expecting a mild sweetness. Instead, your throat catches fire, your eyes water, and you nearly snort it back out in a fine mist.
Oh,
Everyone bursts into laughter. Pounding the table in delight, historians still argue whether Viking mead was brewed primarily for ceremonies, or if it was a casual household beverage. Judging by tonight's carefree guzzling, you suspect the latter, though you wouldn't call anything involving whale-based finger foods casual. Without a generous sense of humor, plates arrive more like giant wooden slabs really each, stacked with steaming chunks of whale, forest herb stuffing, and strange, glistening morsels you hesitate to identify. You poke one suspiciously. It wiggles. You decide to leave it alone for now. A burly man beside you leans over, slaps your back, almost knocking your soul into the rafters, and shouts proudly about how he once wrestled a slab of blubber so big it almost became his wife. You laugh because, what else can you do? He immediately begins demonstrating his blubber wrestling technique using a stray sausage as a stand-in. To the roaring approval of the table, children run up and down the aisles playing games that involve flinging small bones at each other, squealing when elders pretend to catch them midair. One girl, cheeks red from firelight, slides next to you and hands you a small carved whale figurine. You thank her awkwardly, unsure if it's a toy or a deeply spiritual object. She just giggles and dashes off, leaving you holding your new, slightly greasy talisman. You take another bite of meat, this one surprisingly tender, the seaweed seasoning mellowed out by the forest herbs you gathered earlier. You chew slowly, savoring the layers of smoke, temps, and an almost sweet undertone from the hidden berry glaze. It's complex in a way that makes your head tilt and your eyebrows do a curious little dance. You realize with some pride that you can now recognize hints of kelp and even a dash of that spicy powder from the traders. Historians still debate whether communal meals like this were daily occurrences or reserved for victories, marriages, or festival days. Judging by the joyous chaos tonight, you'd guess that every day in a Viking longhouse could turn into a feast if someone felt especially lucky or bored. At the head of the table, the chieftain rises, raising his horn and roaring a toast that sounds like a bear gargling honey. The hall erupts in cheers. Mead splashes. People stand and hug. Some fall right back into their seats laughing. You raise your own horn timidly, then get swept into a toast so fierce you nearly lose your balance. Through the clamor you catch snippets of whispered stories, tales of sea monsters mistaken for driftwood, of distant raids where spices were won in epic drinking contests, of lovers who swapped secret berry sauces under moonlight. There's warmth in these stories that transcends the roaring fires, a tender thread of belonging stitched into every exaggerated anecdote. An old woman slides in next to you and presses a small bowl into your hands. It's a dessert of sorts, whale, fat whipped with wild berries and a drizzle of forest honey. You stare at it suspiciously. She watches you expectantly, eyes glinting with the mischievous joy of someone who knows you have no escape. You brace yourself, take a spoonful, and your eyebrows fly skyward. It's rich, heavy, and oddly floral-like. Someone tried to make an ice cream out of a forest picnic. You manage a pleased hum, and she claps, delighted around you. Coals are challenging each other to drinking games. Grandmothers are critiquing each other's berry mixtures, and kids are daring each other to chew raw kelp strips. In the glow of it all, you realize this isn't just dinner. It's a living tapestry of humor, bravery, survival stitched together with whale blubber, seaweed paste, and a lot of questionable jokes. Your muscles relax into the hum of voices, and the warmth radiating from the fire. You've become part of the longhouse pulse. A single laugh among 100, echoing against the timber walls and drifting into the night sky beyond. You lean back, your belly so full it feels like you've swallowed a small seal whole. Around you, the longhouse hums with a soft, contented lull, like a cat purring after a particularly mischievous meal. But the night is far from over. As you rub your eyes, trying to focus, you notice a young man fiddling with a set of curious utensils near the hearth. He holds up a long, curved iron fork with prongs bent in ways that look suspiciously like someone's first blacksmithing experiment. Gone wrong? Next to it. He sets down a flat wooden paddle, a small bone spoon, and something that might be an ancient version of tongzor. If you squint, a medieval back-scratcher. You wander closer, curiosity piqued. He explains, gesturing with all the enthusiasm of a kid showing off a new toy, that these tools were designed to handle the fickle spirit of whale meat over fire. Historians still argue whether these gadgets were strictly culinary or sometimes used in rituals and games. Some suggest they doubled as status symbols. Others say they were purely practical inventions born from too many burnt dinners. He invites you to try turning a chunk of meat sizzling over an open flame. You grip the iron fork, feeling its surprising weight. You attempt to flip the meat, only to send it spinning dramatically into the ashes. The crowd bursts into laughter, some rolling on the ground as if you've just performed the greatest comedic act since the last mead barrel ran dry. Undeterred, you try again, this time with the paddle. You manage a clumsy but successful turn, earning a cheer and a friendly slap on the back so powerful it nearly launches you into the fire. You feel a sense of pride mixed with relief that you didn't end up as the evening's accidental entertainment. Nearby, two older women fuss over fire pits, expertly adjusting embers and propping logs at just the right angles. They create small, swirling pockets of heat that dance and crackle like mischievous sprites. You realize fire control is an art form here, requiring patience and a borderline telepathic relationship with burning wood. One woman cackles and calls her fire Helga, scolding it gently as if it were a moody pet goat. You squat beside her. She demonstrates how to adjust airflow by moving stones and ash. You watch as the flames shift from angry orange snaps to calm blue whispers. She hands you a small bunch of birch bark and instructs you to toss it in at just the right moment for a sweet, smoky note. You toss it too soon. The flames roar to life. Licking dangerously close to your eyebrows, she shrieks with laughter, slapping her thigh so hard she nearly topples into her own pot of bubbling herbs. Historians still debate whether these women were the true unsung culinary champions of Viking life. Their intimate knowledge of flame and smoke determined not only dinner success, but also survival during long voyages and brutal winters. Watching them, you believe every word. At the far end of the hall, a few teenagers are using whale ribs as makeshift skewers, turning them slowly over small personal fires. The smell wafts over earthy, smoky with a hint of berry temps. One boy proudly displays his creation before dramatically devouring it in 3 messy bites. His face painted in drips of rendered fat and ash. You can't help but applaud a smaller group sits on the floor, carving wooden bowls and ladles. Each piece is adorned with knotwork patterns and tiny animal heads, dragons, wolves, and mythical sea creatures that look like they crawled straight out of someone's fever dream. One elder squints at you, hands you a half-finished ladle, and grunts. Try. You fumble with the knife, shaving off an accidental chunk. Everyone around bursts into laughter, but they clap encouragingly, as if you've joined an exclusive club of clueless yet enthusiastic apprentices in the corner. A curious contraption catches your eye, a small rotating spit balanced on rocks, driven not by hand but by a waterskin slowly dripping liquid into a counterweight bucket. It's an ancient, slow-roast mechanism so delightfully absurd it could easily star in a Viking-themed episode of a modern cooking show. You lean closer, admiring the gentle spin of a fat-laden meat slab, its edges caramelizing to a golden brown. You think back to your own kitchen button-controlled ovens, precise timers, silent exhaust, fans, and realize there's a peculiar kind of poetry in this controlled chaos. Here, each sizzling snap and each puff of smoke tells a story, an impromptu poem written in fire and grease. As the night deepens, you finally set your newly mangled ladle aside and watch the embers glow, like tiny, faraway stars. Around you, The gentle clatter of utensils blends with low, satisfied murmurs and occasional bursts of raucous laughter. You feel a warmth that isn't just from the fire warmth born from community, from shared mistakes and shared triumphs. And as you stretch your sore arms and let out a content sigh, you realize that tonight you didn't just witness Viking cooking, you participated in it, messy missteps and all.